Well, we're bizarrely having this dry spell. The reservoirs are pretty down at 25% and all that. And yet, in my report from Solby, I was looking back at what was going on in especially Laxey last October. With me is MHK Martyn Perkins to talk about that report that's now out into all that situation. Martin, there's 10 points. But I think it's all pretty obvious stuff, isn't it? I mean, it hasn't caused great amount of excitement because I think everyone knows exactly where the problems were lying in the first place.
Yeah, I think the report has collated the locals' worries that if they'd asked any local before the event, they could have been told what the problems were. However, it's down in black and white now, and let's just hope that the government sit up and take notice of it, because one of the things that comes out of the report is that they want a committee, but I feel that they should have one person, the flood champion, right across government, because this doesn't just affect Garff and Laxey. This is right across government, affecting somewhere in the region of 4,000 homes. And as global warming creates all these flash floods, we need to make sure we look at that very closely.
Right, well that's one thing that came up, that maybe up to 3 different departments of government might have responsibility for one part or the other, and everyone's moving things around, or potentially has that thing that
it's very
see somebody else about it.
It's a very sorry email trail that, emails went to the MUA, they went to DEFRA, and they got referred back to the DOI. And it was somebody, everybody and nobody that was taking responsibility. Now, as we go forward, we need one phone number, one person in government responsible, and it's got to be their full-time job, not just a few hours a week when they have a bit of spare time. And that person, in my opinion, has to have the clout to call in resources from the other departments to make sure that we can really focus on preventive maintenance. Now, this has been going on since 2013. The government was well aware of it in those days. So we've had a go at it at when the bridge collapsed with the bus. We're going to do great things. It ground to a halt, complacency set in, nothing much was done. And now again, we've had another warning, and we really must make sure that we do the preventive maintenance and maintain it. Don't just go at it for a year or two. It's got to be maintained.
I mean, there was a combination of things there, particularly, of course, they made that hole in the wall, of course, that particular point. Has anyone taken any responsibility at all for all these little things that maybe they should have done differently?
It's not been mentioned in the report, and that's a bit of a disappointment. In the report, it just states that there was a hole in the wall, and I'm sure some of the insurers of the people that were damaged are looking around for the causation of the problem. But it has now been filled, and it's a reinforced gate that is very useful for access to the river and making sure the weirs are kept clear of detritus.
I mentioned we've got these sort of drought conditions at the minute, so everything's quite low. In fact, they're slowing down all the amount of water going down rivers that are still using the reservoirs. But back to Laxey, isn't this a good time to do any of the work in the streams now while we have such dry conditions? I mean, do those things get taken into consideration?
Yeah, well, there's various considerations, and of course the fish breeding time, I'm not quite sure exactly when it is, but there is a ban on certain things you can do in the river at certain times. But it's actually more or less on the river banks. They've sort of done the logging up through Laxey, but of course when you get to the Glenroy River, the woods around and about are still producing timber that falls down that we must keep out of the way. And I think that's why you need a maintenance gang periodically going up through, looking at high risk trees and bushes and clumps of roots and things that can possibly cause a blockage. And in fact, full marks to the MUA, MU as it is now, they are looking at a catching mechanism to catch stuff up above the Laxey Glen Mills that can be emptied on a regular basis. So if there is any logs and trees that get stuck, it will be collected at a sort of sieve, if you like, and they can get in and get them out.
And this is not just for Laxey. I mean, this must be island-wide, presumably, keeping the maintenance going.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Island-wide, the Ramsey, Solby, Castletown, all these places have properties at risk. Now, the big concern for me at the moment in the Laxey community, and it's if you've got a postcode IM7, the insurance companies are watching what is happening, and there are various people that still are not back in their house and they can't get insurance.
But they're still not back in their house. Sorry, that's
terrible. Yeah. There's probably 5 or 6 families still not back in their houses.
And as you say, insurance only comes in once normally. Then you're sort of earmarked for not being covered again.
Yeah, well, your heart goes out to these families because they've actually been in lockdown in a rented house, some of them in a very small place with families, and they're still not back in their own house, and they can't get insurance. And I know Minister Cannon is looking at the Reshore scheme in the UK to see if we can get it extended to the Isle of Man, but we need it now. These people are absolutely desperate. They haven't got insurance, so can the government possibly underwrite the excess?
And on a wider note, just people thinking about wanting to put their house in the market, there's going to be all sorts of issues there, aren't there?
It's a non-starter. I mean, who would buy a house in Laxey Glen at the moment? And your heart goes out to these people because the house, it was like a little palace down there. I don't know if you ever drove down Glen Road, but it was lovely little cottages, absolutely superb. And then to suddenly have this, and then on top of that, the coronavirus, when you've been out of your own house, is just heartbreaking for these people.
Well, you and Daphne, I think, are keeping obviously pressure on people. There's various questions coming up in Tynwald again, or House Keys this week, and that sort of thing. How confident are you that things will be sorted?
Daphne and I work very closely together, and we're keeping the pressure on, as you say. We've got to make sure it's sorted. We cannot go back to where we were before. And there is a lot government can do, and it's maintaining it and making sure there is one phone number, because we cannot afford to be drifted from one department to another. There is somebody ultimately in government that has to take responsibility for this going forward.
And if we by any chance have another flood flash this year, are things likely to be any different, or could we be back to square one again, bar the hole in the wall, for instance?
I think the hole in the wall, I mean, you can never guarantee anything, but I think we've made some good preparations. We are making sure that the highway people clear all the gullies and the culverts and one thing and another. But on these flash floods, the existing drains just get completely overwhelmed. And I feel that we should perhaps put some more culverts in that kick in when the flash floods happen, because it just overwhelms everything else.
And finally, while I've got you on here, let's talk about global warming in the sense of what do we do with the bottom of Laxey and sea walls? Where are we up to on that?
Sea walls is still being looked at, and it's still on the cards, but I believe it's been pushed down the line a little bit. One of the problems is, all this is going to cost a lot of money, and the Arup report says it's something like 900 million over the next 100 years, which is a phenomenal amount of money. But if we don't start now in a small way and make sure we maintain everything, it's going to cost us more in the long run. I mean, DEFRA are doing peat restoration up on the top, and it does cost money, but it's not the mega bucks of a sea wall.
Yeah, but there wasn't any unity in Laxey when they did a demonstration size of it, and a lot of people didn't like that at all. So I didn't think that was going anywhere very fast. And if you don't have agreement, then this thing will just slide, won't it?
That's right, and that is why you need a flood champion, or a flood czar has been put forward, one person that can take responsibility for it.
Okay, and do you think, back to where we started with this whole thing, is that it? Do you think Laxey is now a safer place anyway, if you have a house and a flash flood?
It's as safe as you can make it. Any house these days, you can have upsurging under your house, you can have subsidence or anything, but it's as safe as we can make it. And we need to maintain that and give people confidence that life will get back to normal.